With budget
Yes.
matters.
So I'll start.
Okay.
Okay. So at this time, what I would like to present are some preliminary budget numbers as we get ready for fiscal year 18. I want to review some of the assumptions that we're making in our revenues and our expenditures as we build the budget for fiscal year 18. As a reminder, our fiscal year 17 budgeted revenue, our primary source of revenue for the school district is the basic foundation formula. That is the money that we receive from the state. Our second largest revenue source is property tax, which is what our local patrons pay related to their real and personal property. So the third major source, we also get federal revenue. We receive Proposition C, the statewide sales tax, is also a large revenue source for the district. This particular slide is a graph showing the support that we received on local revenue, state revenue, federal revenue, and our Proposition C. As you look back, I guess again, this is kind of a something we're talking about back to fiscal year 02, so 15 years ago. As you can see, the state was a much larger portion of our district's revenues. That has declined over the years, and now the state and local support is about the same. So since the state foundation formula is such a large component of the revenue source for the school district, we need to take a look annually at how the state is performing and what it appears as though the revenue will be for the upcoming year. We do see some positive trends through March of this year. As they built the budget for fiscal year 17, so as they were working on the budget a year ago, the governor's office and the legislators had a consensus revenue estimate of 3.8% growth over the prior year. As we look at March, year to date, March 2017, it's actually 4.3% above last year. So we do see a positive trend. However, one of the things that we do see, as you note on the slide, corporate income tax continues to decline as compared to the prior year. One of the other things that, as I read about state budget, one of the other concerns, the state is behind on the refunds issued, so it's possible that there might be an adjustment in April as income tax refunds are remitted back. So there's, it appears as though there's a little bit of delay in the refunds. Other state revenues that support the general revenue at the state, casino tax revenue, the lottery revenue. Over the past few years, the growth in those areas has been less than what we had seen previously. We are seeing a positive trend, but it's still not up to projections. The Classroom Trust Fund, which is not an additional revenue for the schools, but it's part of what supports the foundation formula. Per weighted average daily attendance, we're being paid $405 per weighted average daily attendance. A component of the foundation formula, as you know, is the state adequacy target, and on the March payment, the March 2017 payment, we received $6,160 per weighted average daily attendance. So as we look to next year, the fiscal year 18 state budget, the consensus revenue that was agreed upon was 3%. Just a couple of notes. The budget for the state must be passed by May 5th at 6 p.m. The House has passed their portion of the budget. It is now being debated in the Senate. I did not hear any results from today, but as of today, the Senate has not started debating that. So, the governor recommended for DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The funding source for that is presented in House Bill 2. The governor recommended a $3.2 million increase over the prior year, or over this year. The House, when they passed House Bill 2, they approved a $45 million increase in the formula. So what the House did was fully fund the foundation formula. Now, as part of that, there were other funding sources for the school district that were impacted. The House did eliminate the public placement fund. Our school district receives about $50,000 a year from the public placement fund, and that was eliminated out of the House. There were also increases to the transportation appropriation that had been recommended by the governor. The Senate, as I have read what it appears as though that the Senate will do, is approve more than what the governor recommended, so greater than the $3 million, but it appears as though they will not fully fund the formula. There are some potential future impacts if they fully fund the formula that will cause in the fiscal year 19 for the formula to cost more because they will have to pay for some early childhood funding. So there's a concern that the revenues, it's just not there. So they have a concern about fully funding the formula for next year. So I guess we will wait and see what the Senate does and then adjust our budget accordingly. As we talked previously, the state foundation formula represents about 36% of the school district's operating revenue. So depending on where the Senate lands for the House Bill 2, the estimated range for the state adequacy target is anywhere from 6,160 to 6,241. Just some basics about the foundation formula. As you know, the current foundation formula was passed in 2005. That was Senate Bill 287. The purpose of that particular bill was to adequately fund school districts. It did not have the goal of being equitable, but adequate. Every 2 years, the state adequacy target is recalculated, and it's based on the performance districts, which those are the districts that, what are termed successful districts that score a perfect on the APR. The calculation for the foundation formula is our weighted average daily attendance, and I'll talk just a little bit more about the calculation for that, multiplied by the state adequacy target that is determined, times the dollar value modifier. So each region, it's determined what the dollar value modifier, the lowest, the minimum is 1, and then you can get additional weight depending on where you're located. Subtract local effort, and that calculation is the state funding. This particular slide shows what the state adequacy target has been over the past few years. So back in 2009, we were at 6,117 was the calculated amount for the state adequacy target. As you will note, between 2014 to 2016, there was a reduction in the state adequacy target. House Bill 1689 reinstated a cap that was put on that calculation. So that's why the cost to fund the formula has been reduced since back in 2014. Prior to House Bill 1687, the calculation would be made for the foundation formula. If there was not enough money to fully fund the formula, then on the bottom would be a proration factor. Since this current foundation formula has been in place, there has never been enough money to fully fund, so we've always had a proration factor. And then beginning 2 years ago, instead of it being a proration factor on the bottom, the state adequacy target is adjusted to reflect the amount of money that is appropriated for the foundation formula. So that, in essence, becomes the proration factor. One of the components that we talked about of the foundation formula is the weighted average daily attendance. So the calculation starts with average daily attendance. So we know the number of kids that are in our school district, and it's determined how often that they attend. So that becomes your regular term average daily attendance. Based on, I guess, history research, it's determined that certain students are more costly, and therefore this particular formula provides a weight for certain students in the district. So, for instance, if we have 4,000 students in our district, one of the weights that we receive is based on our free and reduced lunch count. So if we have more than 36% of our students, and that's our current percentage of weights for free and reduced lunch, then we get additional weights. So, for example, we take our 4,000 students, multiply that times the 36%, which is 1,445. If we have more students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, then we get additional weights. For our special ed students, if we have more than 12.16% of our population that has an IEP, then we will receive additional weights. Our limited English proficient students as well, if we have more than 1.94% of our students, then we receive additional weights. The calculation for Senate Bill 287, so this is taking our current year, 2016-17, what is projected. So as of March, the state adequacy target was 6,160. So we are projected to get in the current year $14,683,000. So if we look at next year, if we say the state adequacy target is 6,160, so the same, then we apply that to next year's projected weighted average daily attendance. Then we say that we are going to receive from the state $14,771,000. On the far right column, we have ran a projection that says, well, what if the state adequacy target is 6,241? What would be the amount that we receive from the state? If that is the case, if we're able to get that particular amount of funding, then we will receive $15.1 million.
What percent is that, Vicki? I'm sorry. I can't see all those numbers.
So if the state adequacy target is fully funded, so
Okay.
if the formula is fully funded,
Okay, thank you.
it would project a state adequacy target of 6,241.
Yeah, I can.
So we would get 15.1 million. So the range that we're looking for our state funding is about $325,000 range. So, okay, does anybody have any questions about the state portion of our revenue funding? Okay. On our local property tax, we take our assessed valuation for the school district, multiply that times our tax rate. We get our historical collection rate, and then that's what we budget for our local property tax. As a reminder, every other year is a reassessment year, so 2017 will be a reassessment year. I don't have any preliminary numbers from the county as of yet, so right now in the budget I am utilizing last year's assessed valuation. It appears as though, if you look around in the school district, that there has been a lot of new construction. So hopefully the school district will benefit from that new construction. We should. But right now I don't have an estimate on that. So I'm utilizing, in the estimates that I'm using at this time, just last year's assessed valuation. Anybody have any questions regarding the local? Okay, Proposition C. Proposition C, if you recall, was a statewide sales tax passed back in 1982. It is collected statewide. It's collected at the state and then redistributed back to the school district based on the prior year's weighted average daily attendance. The revenue in related to Proposition C has been very strong, and I would anticipate it continuing to be strong. Many of us probably were impacted by the Amazon starting to collect sales tax. So many of the online ordering, they're starting to collect sales tax. So that will go into the state of Missouri and be redistributed. So feel very strong that we will meet the estimated range for the Proposition C. In forecasting out for fiscal year 18, the range is about $975 to $985 per weighted average daily attendance. So comparing all of those major sources of revenue, and this particular slide just shows kind of a recap. If we take a look at 2017 original budget in those categories, our local tax, our Proposition C, and the state foundation formula, comparing that to what we're seeing right now on fiscal year 18's estimates and trying to be somewhat conservative in that, it appears as though we have about an additional $866,000. Now the range, I did put a range down at the bottom. That kind of depends on the state adequacy target. If you go at the low end, that amount would be $739,000. At the high end for the state foundation formula, $1,064,000. I will point out at the on the local property tax, that top line, that does include the 5 cents. So this is the final year of the phase-in of the operating levy that was passed in 2015. So that 5 cents is added to that particular line. Okay, so any questions regarding revenues and any assumptions being used at this time? Okay, so we'll move to our operating expenditures. As we have talked in the past, when you look at our operating expenditures, which is our Fund 1 and Fund 2 expenditures, the vast majority of those expenditures are tied up in salary and benefits, 81%. So let's take a look at some of the components of salary and benefits. Health insurance. Right now I'm building into the budget a 10% increase in health insurance. I think that will probably be necessary, looking at our trends year to date that we will have. Certainly there will be more meetings upcoming to discuss that, but just based on what I'm seeing as trends right now, I think we need to build in a 10% increase in health insurance. Movement on the salary schedule, which means servicing the salary schedule, so giving everybody a year of service if they've gone back and received additional educational degrees and moved over on the column. That movement is $386,000, so that includes the salary plus the associated benefits to move on the salary schedule. That includes our certificated staff and our support staff. If we were to increase the base for each percentage change, that represents about $277,000 of additional expenditures as compared to the current year. And then, as you know, next year we have our early childhood additions. So there are several more teachers, there are aides, and there are a couple of support staff positions that are being included in that $707,000. So as you look at those particular components compared to the current year, new expenditures for next year, that would range from $1.7 million to $2 million, depending on the 1.7 would include a 1% change in the base salary. $2 million would be a 2% change in the base salary. Anybody have any questions regarding assumptions to build that particular part? Okay, wanted to take a look at, this is last year's annual Secretary of the Board report. As a reminder, this is the report that we are required to submit in August each year to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It reflects and reports our prior year results. It shows what our beginning fund balances or reserves were, adds the revenue for the year, subtracts the expenditures to get the new ending fund balance. So we ended fiscal year 16 with our operating, which is our general fund and our teachers fund, at $12.9 million, which is 33.88% unrestricted fund balance. Okay, so if we look at the last few years, what have our unrestricted fund balances done? We have slowly declined those balances. It's, you know, I look at the change in those percentages and we're not seeing wild changes. It's very slowly. We have very healthy reserves, and back in fiscal year 13 it was at 36.8. We intentionally said we're going to use some of those reserves in providing programs for the school district. So slowly those balances have dropped. Last year we ended at 33.88. But again, it's not a steep decline. It's a very small slope, I guess I will say. When I presented the budget last year, fiscal year 17, we said we would end this year at 25% unrestricted fund balances, or $10.4 million. Historically, you guys all know that we budget conservatively. So we budget revenues conservatively. We're never going to spend more than what we've budgeted. So we always end better than what we've budgeted. So after reviewing actual results through March of 2017, I would project at this time that our ending unrestricted fund balance would be about 33%. So that's down just slightly from last year. It would represent an operating fund decrease of about $235,000.
Wow.
So if we look at where we budgeted fiscal year 17 compared to what's being projected, this particular slide shows that comparison. So we are being very pleased with the results of our expenditures year to date, and so we're trending much better. Any questions about fund balances, expenditures? Talk just a little bit about our budget process. Annually, we meet, Dr. Zales, Mr. Henshaw, Mr. Hounsome, and I will meet with the building principals, all of the directors. We try to get a sense of what are the needs for the upcoming year. Are there things that we need to address? And we build that into the budget. We also have meetings with the Salary Welfare Committee, which is a group of teachers, We also meet with Supporting Student Success, which is a group of support staff members, secretaries, representatives from the nurses, custodians, so a variety of people. And we talk about our results and what the upcoming year looks like. As a board, we ask you annually to approve different areas of our budget. Tonight, we approved the second portion of the supply, textbook, and equipment. Next meeting, we plan to present the building and grounds, which will be all of our facility needs for next year presented. Do we need new boilers, roofs, et cetera? That will be presented at our next meeting. We also ask the board to approve new salary schedules. And then finally, in June, we approve the next year's budget. This particular slide, I just showed anticipated dates for the recommendation and hopefully approval of each of those items. I guess the only thing that I would say on that is on the salary recommendation, it is possible that we could move that to May if we don't hear anything from the Senate and don't know more. But right now, we are projecting that we will be able to present that at the next board meeting.
We had one salary committee meeting this week, had it on Tuesday, so the numbers, this whole presentation was presented to them, so all the assumptions that are built in are for that movement on the schedule at this juncture, because we don't know what's going to happen, because we're too far away from the end of the session, which is why we built ranges into the state adequacy target. As usual, we're trying to pin down a static off of a moving target, which has been the norm for the discussion for most of all of you, except for Carla, on the board for the last several years, actually since 2005. When you see the history of the state adequacy target and the proration, you can see we go in past this time not knowing what it is we're going to receive. So, Salary Committee is a very good group of people. They certainly intimately understand what it is we're working through, and we'll continue to talk about health insurance as well. So we meet again on the 25th at 7 a.m. Hopefully by the 25th. At that time, we'll know more about what the foundation formula projections will be for us, so we can make some more concrete decisions.
That's my last slide, I believe.
Is this,
Yes.
is this when we give Vicki a standing ovation?
Yeah, no kidding. And Carla, we
feel like
have
we
a
need
test
to.
on this in
Yeah.
closed session tonight, so.
There is a, this is
I wouldn't be able to pass.
I just get the opportunity to present it. There's a lot of people that help with this, so, yeah.
That's great.
A
Man,
lot of people.
Are you ready for a question?
I am.
For a question? Thank
I hope I can.
you. You won't be. So we've rolled in our levy increase,
Correct.
and we've not committed those funds as we've received them, because the 25 cents was to pay for our early childhood education program and hiring people, which the majority of those costs are coming due this fall. So we would expect that we may earn or have a lesser of a deficit this year because we've received the funds ahead of when we were going to spend them, correct?
Yes. One thing I will also remind the board that next year we will have some expenditures that in the following year will be reimbursed by the state.
Right.
So I anticipate that next year we might see a little bit of a blip in expenditures being greater than the revenues.
Because that's in the 770,000.
It is.
And part of those are reimbursed the year after.
Following year, yes.
Yep.
The Early Childhood Special Ed is a program that is reimbursed the year following. Many of our federal and state programs are reimbursed in the year in which the expenditure occurs.
So
But
as-
Early Childhood Special Ed is an exception.
So as we move forward, don't let us forget about that as we're.
Correct.
Yeah, and if you also recall that gray sheet that we put up for the 785 to 1.1 million, which was a line item for everything that we did from early childhood
Yep.
through activities, save transportation, that 707 is that piece to what we promised to do in that range. That was 4 to 8 teachers, 4 to 8 teacher aides, all those things,
Yeah.
minus transportation and utilities. Yeah. So that's a test number for that.
It is. Some of those expenses have already been committed, though,
Yes.
and trying to keep all that in one neat little ball is difficult. So,
It's a challenge, yeah. Challenging, yes.
yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well done, Vicki, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki.